Hi guys, and welcome to another lesson with me. It is going live, so if you have any questions, please do use the YouTube comment box in order to pose it, and I'll try and answer them live on screen. So today we're going to be looking at how we can change the subject of a formula, and I'd say it's quite a relatively difficult subject, only because it's one that we probably don't rehearse enough in school. You will need a pen and paper, and also access to hbkportal.co.uk/mwb/home for some of the practice questions that I'm going to put on or ask you to do later on. I think one of the biggest questions that you're going to have is, well, if you're saying it's something that we don't rehearse enough in school, why do we then need this? Well, here's a really good example. This is a formula that relates to how we can convert degrees centigrade into degrees Fahrenheit. And if I said that C is equal to 25, would you be able to work out what F is? Well, hopefully with this one, if C was 25, divide it by 5 and then times it by 9 gives me 45, and then add on 32 would then give me 77. So I can work out what F is. However, what if I know F but not C? What if F was now 25? Would you be able to work out what C is? Or what if I gave you a whole load of different questions that involved knowing what F is and you needed to work out what C is? Well, yes, I mean, this is solving an equation, but if you were doing this time and time again and needing to substitute numbers in for F and having to work out what C is, this formula is not set up in a relatively useful way, simply because you'd have to keep solving the equations every single time. So what we mean by changing the subject is to rearrange a formula into a more meaningful form, where the thing that you want to work out is by itself on one side of the equal sign. And here's a really good example, and kind of like some of the basics of what you'd need to know as part of this subject. So change A to be the subject of this formula. So I want to end up with A is equal to rather than C is equal to. I need to get rid of B from this side, and this would then leave A by itself. So to get rid of B, let's make it 0, so I'll take it away. And I end up with C minus B, because whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other to keep them equal. What if I had A times B is equal to C? To make A the subject in this case, I need to do the opposite of times by B. So I divide by B. What if you had a number of operations together in one problem? AB plus C is equal to D. I want to make A the subject. So first of all, I need to get rid of the plus C. So let's make that 0 by taking it away. Whatever I do to one side, I do to the other. So the plus C hops onto the other side of the equal sign, and now I've got minus C here. I want to make A the subject, which means I need to get rid of times by B. Well, in the previous question, we had this. So in order to get rid of times by B, I divide by B. So let's have a look at trying to model some of these questions. So I'm going to go through each of the ones on the left-hand side, and then I'm going to ask you to have a go at the ones on the right. To do this, I'm going to use my sketch pad and model it on screen. So for each of these questions, I need to make A the subject. So in my first question, I've got D minus A is equal to B. Now at the moment, A is being subtracted from D, and what I don't want to end up with is negative A is equal to. So I could do a couple of things here. I could times each side by -1, or try and rearrange it so that A is now on the right hand side of the equal sign. I'm going to go with the option of times everything by -1, and the reason for this is that you'll see that D times -1 is now negative D. Minus A, or negative A, now becomes positive A, and then on the other side I've then got negative B. So to get rid of minus d, I need to add d. And adding d not only adds d to the left-hand side of the equal sign, I add it to the right as well. Negative d add d is 0, so that cancels out, and I get a is equal to minus b plus d. Or, in this case, I can have it the other way round, so it will be d minus b. Either one of those two answers would be absolutely fine for this question. Moving on to question 2. AE plus D is equal to F. I want to make A the subject, so I need to start moving individual letters onto the other side. First of all, I'll get rid of the D, so I'll subtract D from both sides. This will leave me AE is equal to F minus D. So notice how the plus D has hopped onto the other side. Some people call this like the float and ping technique. Some people like writing minus D underneath so they can see that it definitely cancels out and then moves onto the other side, because whatever you do to one side happens to the other. Don't mind how you do it, just as long as we're following kind of like sensible rules here of we're getting rid of anything that's generally added or subtracted first, and I'll say that with a bit of a clause because we've got to be careful with the next question. However, I now need to get rid of the times by E. So A is equal to F minus D, and because it was times by E, I'll now divide by E. Next one, FA minus C, all divided by D, and this is equal to E. Now, as the questions get progressively harder, sometimes people find it a little bit easier to be able to put this as a map of all the things that were happening to A as we move through the question. So the first thing that happened to A was we times by F. Then we took away C, and then we divided by D, and we got E. Now this kind of flow diagram doesn't always work, especially when the subject appears more than once. But for simple questions where A appears only once in this question, a diagram like this can massively help. So notice how the last thing that happened to the problem was actually to divide by D. So to revert back, I need to times by D. So timesing both sides by D would then give me FA minus C is equal to ED. I now need to get rid of minus C. Well, to get rid of minus C, I add C. So I'm now going to get FA is equal to ED plus C. And finally, the last thing that happened was to times by F. So we now need to divide by F. So A is equal to ED plus C, all divided by F. Now these questions do get this one has definitely got a lot harder since our first question, but it is done through kind of just undoing what happened to A in every single case. So looking at the last one, A squared plus B is equal to C. So first of all, we squared it. So if we wanted to do a diagram, you could say that we squared it, and then we added B, and then we got C. So I need to get rid of the B first of all, so we'll work backwards and do C minus B. So A squared is equal to C minus B, following the operation in the other direction this time. But in order to get rid of add, we've subtracted, times was divide. The opposite of squared is to square root. So in this case, we've got A is equal to C minus B, all square rooted. Now for your questions, what I'd like you to do is use a pen and paper. I'll give you 5 minutes, and whether you're using kind of like the flow diagram technique or just simply rearranging through algebra, I do not mind. Now have a go at the questions that are on your screen. So have a go at the ones on the right hand side. You've got 5 minutes to try and do as many as you can, and I'll go through the answers after 5 minutes. Off you go. Just over 2 minutes left. Okay, if you could finish the question you're on. And let's go through the answers then. So, trying to use a little bit of colour this time to represent the stages that I'm going through in order to rearrange these formulae to give me A as being the subject. With the first one, we've got plus B, so we're going to remove this by subtracting B, making it 0 on the left-hand side. So B minus B is 0, and that means that I've just got A is equal to left on this side. However, whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So you can now see here that if I read it off, C minus B is the resulting expression on the left-hand side. So I've made A the subject because A is now by itself, and I've done it through sensible rearrangement. So with the next one, I want to get the order right, and generally speaking, that for most questions, you'll undo what is happening with A. So A has been multiplied by B, and then it's being added on to H, or if you want to think of it a slightly different way, it's A times by B, then adding H, and you'll get in G. So for this one, I actually want to get rid of H first of all, because I can subtract H from both sides, making H0 on the left and leaving me AB on the left hand side. As you can see here, I've got G minus H on the right. So now I need to get rid of times by B. So I'm going to divide both sides by B, because times by B divide by B will just leave me 1. So I've got 1A is equal to G minus H all over B. So I again have made A the subject. For number 3, thinking about the steps that have happened to A, well, first of all, we times it by C, then we added it onto T, and then finally, thirdly, we've divided by 3. So I need to undo each of those 3 things in order to be able to make A the subject. So we'll start off with, let's times both sides by F, because times by F is the opposite of divide by F. So thinking that times by F and divide by F would cancel out, it will leave me T plus CA, i.e. the numerator, is equal to EF. Step 2 was that we added on T, so I now need to subtract T from both sides. So subtracting T from the left-hand side would give me T minus T is 0, so CA. And on the right hand side I had EF, but now I'm taking away T, so I've got EF take away T. We now need to get rid of times by C, so we'll divide by C. And that will leave me A, because C divided by C is 1, so I've got 1A, is equal to EF minus T. And whenever you struggle to divide something by another thing, the easiest thing to do is write it as a fraction. So in this case, because I can't work out the value of EF minus T until I know the value of all those letters, I'm simply going to write it over C. Now, question 4 must be the I hate you question, because it is quite a difficult one, and there are loads of steps to undo with this. However, let's break this up. That first of all, I was adding 3, so that was step 1. Step 2 is I'm squaring it. Step 3 is that I'm now taking away B, and then I get C. So doing in the same fashion as what we did before, I now need to undo each of those steps. So undoing step 3, instead of taking away B, I'm going to add on B. And negative B add B is 0, so it's going to leave me A plus 3 all squared is equal to C plus B. Step 2 was square, and we saw in the previous examples that to undo squared, we take the square root. So I now need to take the square root of each side. And because I'm taking the square root of something that's been squared, it basically just leaves me A plus 3. And on the right hand side, the square root of C plus B. The final step is to get rid of add 3. So I'm going to take away 3 from both sides. And this is where I've got to be really careful, because although it leaves me A is equal to, on the left hand side, I'm taking away 3 from the square root of C plus B. So C plus B all square rooted, then I take away 3. And the take away 3 does not go inside of the square root. So this one was the most challenging one, and it's very much kind of like the extension to what I would want to get out of today's lesson. Step 1 and 2 of A plus B is equal to C, H is plus AB is equal to G. Those first couple of questions are very much the kind of level that I wanted to be able to target into today's lesson, and the last 2 are very much an extension. So this is where I'd like to move over to a little bit of practice, and I'm going to be using the MWB website in order to be able to do this. If you also wanted to open this up and have a go at your own questions rather than just being stuck with one at each star for this, then please use the link in the description to be able to get access to the site. If you open it up in a separate window, you'll still have access to the video as well. So I'm going to change the subject, which is the first topic at the very top of the list, so I don't need to use the search facility. Just select single star. Up will come a very simple question, very similar to what we've just been practicing as part of the main exercise there. As always, selecting the star will refresh the question, and selecting the answer will then show the answer to the question that you've been given. Moving into the 2-star one, it will naturally get harder and harder and harder still as we move through each of these, to the point where we then get A appearing twice within a subject in the 6-star questions. I'm going to give you about 5 minutes on this to be able to have a go as many questions as you'd like, and for you to use the YouTube chat facility to be able to pose any questions that you might have. Obviously, although I'm giving you a 5-minute time limit, it doesn't stop you from using this site after the video to be able to get a little bit of extra practice. So I'm going to give you 5 minutes now. Have a go, pose any question you'd like, and I'll go through all of these in a moment. Okay, so let's go through the answers to some of these questions. And first of all, I'll do it on screen just to kind of walk you through, especially some of these harder ones towards the bottom. So to begin with, let's have a look at the first. So I need to make D the subject. So I need to take away F from both sides, and that would mean that F minus F will make 0, and we then end up with D is equal to B minus F. The next one, I need to make E the subject. So I need to first of all take away F from both sides, and this would then leave me EC is equal to A minus F. Next step is, because I want to make E the subject, I now need to divide by C. And obviously whenever you divide something which happens to be algebraic by something else, obviously you can't evaluate the top, so we will leave it as a fraction. So it will be A minus F all divided by C. Moving on to question 3, we need to make C the subject, and there are several steps here. So let's just label them off to make our life a little bit easier. First thing we did was we times by D, then we subtracted E, and then finally divided by F. So C times D minus E, all divided by F. There are the 3 steps that we took in order to get B. So I now need to undo each of those. So I'm going to times both sides by F, and this will then mean that I've got just the numerator. So I'll get BF as being equal to CD minus E. I now need to add E to both sides. So I get CD is equal to BF plus E. I now need to get rid of times by D. So I will divide by D on both sides. So C is equal to BF plus E all divided by D. So making C the subject. For question 4, we need to make E the subject. And same thing again, it's getting more and more tricky because the first thing I'm doing is square rooting. Then I'm taking away C, and then I'm dividing by D to give me B. So working backwards, I actually need to times by both sides by D first of all. And this will then give me just the numerator on the left-hand side and BD on the right-hand side. I now need to add C to both sides. So the square root of E is equal to BD plus C. The opposite of square was square root, so that means that the kind of opposite of square root must be to square it. Now this is where it gets a little bit tricky, because I kind of want to square the left hand side, I also want to square the right hand side, but to square it would mean to times it by itself. So I'm actually timesing the left hand side by the square root of E, but the right hand side I'm also timesing by the square root of E, but because it has the same value as BD plus C, we are simply saying that we have got this as being my final answer. Moving on to the next one, and the reason why question 5 looks the way it does is that all of the ones in question 5 are actually real life formulas. Generally formulas involving geometry, or if you keep refreshing them, you'll find that there are some physics formulae in there. So it actually becomes very much real life. And that's the whole point of today's lesson. It was not just to sort of like do a particular topic, like changing the subject. It was about doing something that would be meaningful to you, whether it's in maths, in science, or whatever subject might require you to rearrange a formula. Now with this one, there is a slight catch in that I can use the commutative law to rearrange this into something that would help me appreciate just what's happening to R along the way. And the commutative law basically says that I can, if things are all being multiplied, it doesn't matter what order I multiply them in, I will get exactly the same answer. So in this case, if I did pi times r squared times by the height, that would give me exactly the same answer as if I did pi times height times r squared. Now, the reason why I've rewritten it is I can see several things now. Number one is it's being squared, and number two, I'm timesing it by pi h, rather than having to think of it as two separate things, like timesing it by pi and then timesing it by h. I'm actually going to group these together in brackets, so I'm timesing r squared by pi h. So this means that in order to rearrange this, I'm actually going to divide both sides by pi h. And this moves pi h onto the other side as the denominator of the fraction, and then I get r squared on the right hand side. In order to be able to rearrange this next bit, I need to take the square root of both sides, and this would then give me the square root of v over pi h is equal to r. Quite a tricky one. Question 6 is incredibly challenging because the subject appears more than once. The subject not only appears in the numerator but also the denominator. And we have to use a slightly new skill for this video anyway, which is factorizing as well, to get the subject to not appear in two terms but once. So let's have a look at how I might deal with this. Now, first of all, I need to get a on just one side of this, what looks a bit of a mess. So I'm going to move a onto the other side by timesing by a to get rid of the denominator. So I get CA is equal to D minus 3A. A, although I've got rid of it from the denominator, now appears on two sides of my formula. So let's get it all onto one side. So I'm going to add 3A and add 3A, and this would then give me CA plus 3A is equal to D. So that's great. I've got A now on one side of the formulae, but A appears within two terms. But because it appears within two terms, we can say that it's a common factor of CA and 3A. So because it's a factor, I can now factorize. And taking A outside of the bracket, what would I times A by to give me CA? C. What would I times A by to give me 3A? 3. And now I've got A appearing just once within my formula. And this means that A is being multiplied by C plus 3. So if it's being multiplied by C plus 3, I can now move it onto the other side by dividing by C plus 3. And my final answer is now going to be A is equal to D divided by C plus 3. And that's my final answer with this one. So a really, really tricky set of questions that if you're refreshing question 6 in order to have another go at that style. But every single one of these questions has progressively got harder and has hopefully led us up to something that is more meaningful than just changing the subject of a random formula, especially with question 5. So as part of today's lesson, we've looked at how we can rearrange the subject of a formula, and that means that I'm turning into something more meaningful where the thing that I'm trying to work out is by itself on the left-hand side. We've used rules of rearrangement. We've looked at how we remove plus, subtract, times, divide, square, square root from a range of different formulae when we're doing rearrangement. To finish off with, thank you ever so much for watching this video. Give me a thumbs up if you liked it, subscribe if you loved it, and please do feel free to either use the MWB website for further practice, or if you have access to the Pixel Maths app, please log into that and search for changing the subject of a formula under Take a Test. See you next time.